On the 30th anniversary of their life together, Sasha's mother-in-law presented his family with a gift that was questionable, unpleasant, but not deadly. It was even expected. He and his wife had assumed that something like this might happen, though they still hoped it would somehow pass them by. After all, everyone wants to believe in the best, especially in the idea that family will always remain united and friendly. The beginning of it all had been laid about 6 months earlier, during one of their regular family gatherings. That evening, the brother of Sasha's wife announced that his family was moving away. The news shocked everyone at the table. Only one person reacted especially painfully: Klavdia Mikhailovna, the mother of Sasha's wife. She did not want to let her son go far away from her. She had always been proud of her close-knit family. She rejoiced that everyone lived nearby and gathered together on holidays. She considered herself lucky. Both her son and daughter had stayed close, had not scattered across different cities. Her friend, for example, constantly complained that her children had settled in different towns, leaving her alone. But Klavdia Mikhailovna believed that this would never happen to her. Thank God, she thought. She would not be alone in her old age. She had lost her husband 7 years earlier. Her beloved Kolya had struggled with cancer for 4 long years, exhausting both himself and those around him in his desperate fight against the illness. Still, he managed to ensure that his family would not be left with nothing. Both his wife and children were provided for. By the time his illness began, their daughter and son-in-law had already passed the age of 50, and their own children were grown. Their daughter was married and lived separately. Their son was just about to leave the parental nest, finishing his studies at the institute, preparing to start working full-time and rent his own apartment. Klavdia Mikhailovna was calm about her daughter's family. Everything was fine there. Her son-in-law was a capable, caring man, and the children had grown into good people. Sasha himself had always been glad that he had such a reasonable mother-in-law. He never would have imagined that one day he would not be happy to see her. Until this incident, he had no complaints at all. Klavdia Mikhailovna's son, Sergei, was 45 years old. He had given her 3 grandchildren. At 72, she felt reassured knowing that all her children were close by and under her watchful eye. Whenever she felt lonely, she could visit any of them. In the past, she had helped a lot with her grandchildren, but now her help was no longer really needed. They mostly communicated during family gatherings. When everyone bought their apartments, they deliberately chose the same neighborhood so that Grandma and Grandpa could help with the grandchildren if necessary. That was how they settled. Everyone close, everyone happy. Later, it would already be time for the children to help their mother, but Klavdia Mikhailovna managed on her own. She lived in a 1-room apartment. When the children moved out, she and her husband had sold their 3-room apartment to help their son and daughter. As a result, both children now lived in spacious 3-room apartments, and Klavdia Mikhailovna found a small place perfectly comfortable. Less space meant less worry. The first crack appeared when the big family gathered once again at the daughter's place over a weekend. Nothing seemed to foreshadow trouble, but then Sergei announced that his daughter had been accepted into a private university. Sonia had done well in school and had good chances of entering almost any university. Still, no one expected that she would aim for the capital, and then it turned out that she had been accepted to a university in Moscow, on a state-funded place. That will be hard for you, Seryozhenka, Klavdia Mikhailovna worried. Sonia will need help. How? Will she manage there alone? Sergei and his wife exchanged meaningful glances and smiled. For them, this news was no surprise at all. They had discussed everything long ago and had even traveled together with Sonia to submit documents. They stayed in the capital for 3 days and fell in love with it. The big city impressed them, not like their medium-sized hometown, which they knew inside and out, every corner familiar. Moscow offered completely different scales and opportunities for development. "So, Mom," Sergei finally said, "we've decided to move to Moscow as a family, to be closer to our daughter." Klavdia Mikhailovna gasped. Unexpected did not even begin to describe it. In one moment, everything collapsed. Years of her life flashed before her eyes, family dinners, holidays, familiar routines. "What are you saying?" she muttered, completely lost. Sergei and his wife immediately began to reassure her. There was video calling now, almost like being together in person. They could talk any time. One had to think about the children. They would have more prospects there. Their younger sons would grow up and also enter universities in Moscow. But life is more expensive in Moscow, the sister remarked. You're already struggling here. Her brother calmed her down. For him and his wife, it would actually be better. He worked on rotational shifts and traveling from Moscow would be easier. Plus, there were more job options there. Maybe he wouldn't even need to go far anymore. As for his wife, nothing would change. She did not work and would continue to take care of the home and children. Klavdia Mikhailovna's daughter-in-law had never really worked. At first, she tried to find something, but nothing suited her. Then she got pregnant, and after the second birth, health problems appeared. Sergei adapted by working on rotations, and everyone was satisfied with this arrangement. Klavdia Mikhailovna helped a lot with the grandchildren, especially since her son was often away and it was hard for her daughter-in-law alone. Still, after hearing about her son's move, Klavdia Mikhailovna felt deeply sad. It was her favorite child who was leaving. If it had been her daughter, it somehow would not have hurt as much. She tried to talk Sergei out of it, but it was useless. They had already decided everything. They planned to sell their apartment and buy housing in Moscow. They did not consult anyone, did not even warn anyone that they were considering such an option. Deciding was one thing, but doing it was another. Housing in the capital was expensive. Even a small apartment would be hard to buy in exchange for their provincial 3-room flat, and they were a family of 5. Sonia would also come on weekends from her dormitory. At family dinners, everyone tried to dissuade them, but they had an ironclad plan. Sergei and his wife decided to buy a house. They found a spacious but unfinished one. That was all they could afford. It was located in a village, but they considered it a good option anyway. One could drive to the city easily. They decided to move because they had long dreamed of living in a house. They never thought they would manage to realize that dream. Now such an opportunity appeared. True, they would have to put in a lot of effort to bring the house into proper condition. It was impossible to live there in its current state. So they started renovations and temporarily rented a 2-room apartment nearby. They thought the repairs would go quickly and they would soon move into their own house, but reality turned out to be harsher. There was far more work than they had planned. The water supply and electrical systems were in poor condition. The previous owners had started but not finished the work. If left as it was, everything would have to be redone in a few years. The money they had saved for renovations was not enough. They found themselves in a hopeless situation. Their salaries barely covered rent and daily expenses. After much thought, they saw only one way out: to ask for help from Sergei's mother. Little by little, Sergei began to persuade the elderly woman. Word by word, he brought the conversation to a proposal. She should sell her apartment and move in with them. Everything would be perfect. They would be together, the renovation would be finished faster, and the house was big enough for everyone. When Klavdia Mikhailovna casually told her daughter during a visit that she was moving in with her son, the daughter was surprised but quickly accepted her mother's decision. Her husband asked what would happen to the apartment. Would it be rented out? That was when it became clear that Klavdia Mikhailovna had already put it up for sale. She needed the money for the renovation. What are you doing? Her daughter worried. And if there are problems? Where will you live? What problems? Her mother shook her head. She was sure she would get along fine with her son's family. It never crossed her mind that something could go wrong. She believed she would never have to leave. Her daughter and son-in-law tried to warn her, begged her not to sell her only home, to think carefully. But Klavdia Mikhailovna insisted. She even accused her daughter of selfish motives, saying she was only worried about inheritance. That hurt deeply. What worried the daughter more was the fear that Sergei might one day throw their mother out. Klavdia Mikhailovna was offended. She said she never thought her daughter could be so envious and think so badly of her brother. After that quarrel, she even told her daughter, "You are no longer my daughter." Convinced she was completely right, Klavdia Mikhailovna moved in with her beloved son. It was cramped in the rented apartment, but the renovation of the house progressed faster. She expected that once it was finished, life would become a fairy tale. But reality turned out differently. Only 3 months later, Klavdia Mikhailovna showed up at her daughter's place. Not to prove she had been right, but to complain. She could no longer live with her son's family. She did not go into details, apparently not wanting to speak badly of them. A week later, it was her daughter and son-in-law's wedding anniversary. Her arrival was quite a surprise. Thankfully, the son-in-law was a decent man. He did not throw his mother-in-law out despite everything that had been said before, and the daughter, no matter what, still loved her mother. They did not want to live together, though. After all, Klavdia Mikhailovna herself had once said that there could not be two mistresses in one family. So the daughter decided that it would be better to help her mother live separately. It turned out that Klavdia Mikhailovna had not spent all the money from selling her apartment on the renovation. She had wisely kept a third of it as a safety net. The son had wanted to furnish the house at her expense as well, but she had hesitated. With the remaining money, they could not buy an apartment as good as the one near her daughter's place. But the son-in-law agreed to add the same amount, on the condition that the mother-in-law would have her own separate home. They bought a much smaller apartment in another district. Klavdia Mikhailovna was grateful even for that. They immediately agreed that the apartment would be registered in the daughter's name as a gift. They had already lived together once and then scattered in different directions. They did not want to ruin relationships again over housing issues. Klavdia Mikhailovna was disappointed in her son, but at least her son-in-law had acted honestly. He could have simply said, "We warned you," and closed the door. But he did not. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Please support the channel with a like. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot to me. Until we meet again.